Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Business of Becoming podcast. I'm your host, Lori Kennedy, and this is episode number 38. All of the books and relevant things that I talk about in this episode can be found over on our show notes at thewbh.com/38. Okay, this is an episode that might be triggering to you. And there's definitely times throughout this episode that I'm going to be sharing some tough love because overwhelm is a choice. We get to choose how we want to feel in any given moment. And since this episode is the 3 keys to getting out of overwhelm, I wanted to start off by defining at least my position and taking a stand and saying that overwhelm is a choice. Feeling overwhelmed is a choice. And the more you say, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so stressed out, I'm so anxious, you get what you focus on. And so it's time to change the language. It's time to make better feeling choices for ourselves. And that's what this episode is all about. So before I get into the 3 keys to getting out of overwhelm, I want to define, at least in my own experience, what overwhelm is, how we get into feeling overwhelmed, and then some personality characteristics, some mindset characteristics that I've developed over time that I have found extremely critical to helping me feel the way that I want to feel. So let's start at the top. What is overwhelm? I asked in the Take Your Health Practice online Facebook group, what puts you into overwhelm? And I got a variety of responses, all stemming from financial to mindset to technology to, familial lack of support. Basically, all of the things, could cause overwhelm. So I really wanted to define what overwhelm is. Now, I looked it up. I have a tendency to look up words. It's funny. I use words a lot and I'm like, I wonder if that's actually what it means. So I've gotten into the habit quite obsessively actually of defining words. So the definition of overwhelm, it's a catchphrase for fear, stress, anxiety, self-doubt, burden down versus burn out, right? It's obligations that we feel we have to follow through with. In my experience, overwhelm is the opposite of feeling safe and secure. And I'm going in my life, I want to feel safe and secure. I don't know about you, but I want to feel safe and secure in my life. And so to feel safe and secure, we know that there's a hierarchy of needs, right? We know that the first, base fundamental need, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's 2 fundamental things that we need to feel safe and secure, right? Physiologically, we need to feel safe and secure in terms of having air, water, food, shelter, right? And then secondarily, we need safety. We need financial safety. We need personal safety. So once our physiological needs are met, we need to feel safe, right? And I don't know about you, but when I'm in overwhelm, which shows up for me as anxiety, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I don't feel safe and secure. I feel anything but. And so it's like my basic core fundamental needs are being triggered because I don't feel safe and secure. So the goal is to have a system that gets you out of feeling overwhelmed and moves you closer to feeling safe and secure, which is way easier said than done, except that if you don't do this work and you want to continue down this journey into entrepreneurship, then you're destined to be living a life of feeling overwhelmed and all of the emotional and physical symptoms that come along with that, which, by the way, it's a choice, right? It's a choice. So if we go back to the question of what is overwhelm, right? I think it depends on who you're asking and how it shows up for them, which is very different from how we get into overwhelm, which I'll talk about in just a second. So for me, overwhelm, first and foremost, shows up as feelings of panic and anxiety. I don't actually get depressed. I swing the other way and I get hypervigilant and I feel panicked and I feel super, super anxious. Overwhelm for you could feel like a burden. It could make you irritable. It could make you stressed out. It could make you anxious. It could make you procrastinate. There's no right or wrong in terms of how you feel overwhelmed. But my go-to whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, which is basically obligations or burdened down by things, my go-to is anxiety. And my go-to feels like a lack of control. And those are not feelings of safety and security. So how do we get into overwhelm? I like to ask myself this question a lot. It's like, how did I get here again? Right? When you know exactly, your pattern and your, the way that you function in the world, it's like, you don't want to have these feelings, and yet they're consistently showing up in your life. So it's like, how did I get here? And interestingly, for me, as I was growing my business, and this is directly tied to my issues of self-worth, which we all have, to varying degrees, like issues with self-worth, I would run multiple projects at the same time. I still do, except now I have a lot of help, but I've also learned restraint, and we've put checks and balances in place in my company to make sure that no one's feeling stressed or overwhelmed, in which case we definitely scale back. But this was, a couple years ago when it was myself and now my ex-husband working on the business, and I would pile on the to-dos. I would pile them on to the point where at least a month in, 6 weeks in, 3 months in, I would have a meltdown. And it was like this recurring thing that would happen a lot, where I would end up in tears and I'd be like, this is just too much to handle and we have to scale back. And at one point, I remember him saying to me, like, you do this to yourself. Like, you do this every time. You don't have to do all of these things at one time. And in that moment, it felt like I did, because that was how I measured my level of productivity, by how many to-do list items were on my to-do list. Now it's very different. I actually pride myself on only having 3 things to do, but that's the development. That's the becoming, right? Which is the whole premise of this podcast. So here's some specific ways that I at least got myself into overwhelm, and maybe they resonate with you too. Number 1, not having any clear boundaries, right? What does that actually mean? It means not having a specifically stated start work time, end work time, no boundaries in terms of friends and family, saying yes to everything because that's what you're supposed to do and that's what you feel obliged to do, right? Remember, overwhelm is this level of obligation. So no clear boundaries, saying yes to everything. Now, specific to entrepreneurs, living with the unknowns and the what ifs. That's how we get into overwhelm a lot. It's like most of what we do, as much as there's a roadmap for it, it still feels very unknown, and there's a lot of what ifs. So if you're feeling the what ifs and then you tack on financial struggle, that's a huge cause of overwhelm. Right? Financial struggle, not having a safety net, huge. I know that for me, that was a huge source of anxiety and stress, was not having a safety net, not having a financial safety net, because everything that I made went to either pay myself and put back into the business. So for a long time, I wasn't able to save money. And should something have happened, if the internet would have imploded, I would have been screwed for a bit. Like, I would have adjusted. I'm super resilient, but I have 2 kids to think about. And, I knew that I wasn't being responsible in terms of saving money because there was no money to save for a long time. And so that was a huge source of anxiety and overwhelm. Another source of anxiety and overwhelm, at least for me, was lack of scheduling. So when you are building a company and you have these visions of what you want your business and life to look like, it requires a tremendous amount of planning. And unless that's something which I'm going to talk about as one of the keys, unless that's something that you prioritize, for a long time, I flew by the seat of my pants and we didn't have a plan per se. And even if I did have one, I changed my mind too often anyway. So it didn't really benefit anyone. And I know that not having a plan, not having clear direction, not knowing your to-do actions every single day can be a massive source of overwhelm and anxiety, because you know that there's a lot to do. You're just not sure what it is that you need to do. How else do we get into overwhelm? Not really doing the inner work that we need to do and band-aiding those feelings with whatever it is that you band-aid with. For me, it was carbohydrates. I don't really drink alcohol, so that was an easy one. But for a lot of people, it is alcohol, or it's sugar, or it's too much exercise, or it's, binging on Netflix. It's really numbing yourself out because you don't want to deal with whatever it is that's going on inside your mind and in your heart that is continuously causing you to feel overwhelmed. And then, at least for me, the last way that I continuously threw myself into feeling anxious and overwhelmed was not asking for help. There are a lot of responsibilities that fall on my shoulders, as I'm sure as you feel the exact same in your life as well. And for some reason, I felt like I should be able to handle all the things by myself, which then caused me to feel extremely anxious, tired, and likely disrupted my hormones in ways that I'm still figuring out. And so the biggest change for me in terms of not getting myself into a place of distress and overwhelm is asking for help, is offloading my obligations and responsibilities to literally anyone and everyone who offers at this point. And I know it's really hard to ask for help, but once you start doing it, it's like anything else. It's like a muscle, right? Once you start doing it, it becomes easier and easier. And now it's to the point where it's like, I wonder who can help me with this, because I just don't want to do it. Or I can't do it. Or adding one more thing onto my plate right now will tip me over the edge. And so that's how we get into overwhelm. And given that I am someone who believes that we choose how we get to feel at any given moment, you're going to hear me repeating that phrase over and over and over again, because I can't not, specifically when it comes to feeling overwhelmed, because like I've said already, feeling overwhelmed is a choice. And I believe that you get more of what you focus on. So if you're constantly saying, and be careful of the words that you use to describe how you feel, right? I'm overwhelmed and I'm stressed out. You're going to feel way more overwhelmed and stressed out. And then feeling overwhelmed stops you from being able to move forward because it disrupts focus, right? When you're feeling overwhelmed, your body knows it. And from a physiological perspective, it goes into a state of stress, into the fight or flight response. And when you are in that fight or flight response and your adrenaline is kicked up and your cortisol levels are kicked up, it's really hard to focus on anything and do anything, which is why most of the time when you're in overwhelm, you literally just surf Facebook for hours because you can't do anything else. Now, on the flip side, right, failure, fear, and feeling so overwhelmed that you literally don't know what to do is sometimes part of this journey, because like I said, as much as there's a roadmap, right? Creating something from nothing is scary and it's hard, and it often causes you to feel so far outside of your comfort zone that could, unless you train your mind to think otherwise, could show up for you as overwhelm. And there are certain leadership characteristics, there are certain mindset traits that I've trained myself to have over time so that I can actually enjoy the journey. So that when I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, I'm actually excited to learn versus panic-stricken that I don't know what I'm doing. So there is a mindset switch that must occur if you are going to choose to get yourself out of overwhelm. Some of the characteristics that I've worked hard through therapy, through energetic therapy, through surrounding myself with like-minded people and acknowledging that these are shared feelings, that I am not crazy, that I am not the only one feeling this, are first and foremost, absolutely take responsibility for your thoughts and feelings, because no one else will. And feeling overwhelmed is a choice. And so if you can honor the way that you feel and say, you know what, I take responsibility, and I'm not going to blame my spouse for not helping me and my kids for not putting this away and this and this and that. And the other thing, you need to take responsibility for how you feel. And for me, it's really important that I show up and that I do the work to be the leader amongst the chaos. If you're someone who is wanting to build and grow and scale a business, you are the leader, right? Everyone's looking to you. And I don't know about you, but it's really important for me to show up in a way that I'm proud of. Even when the road in front of me is not certain, even when I don't know what I'm doing, even when everything else seems to not be going as planned. I get to choose how I show up, and for me, it's really important that I show up as a leader. One of the other characteristics that are very important is, well, actually, I'm going to put these two together: resiliency and resourcefulness. If you can hone your ability to be resilient and resourceful, you will 100% thrive and be able to feel safe and secure because you are resilient. And that takes going through things, hard things sometimes, unfortunately, over and over and over again to prove to yourself that you are resourceful, that you can harness resources and bring things into your life even when you don't have much, and that you are always someone who will, you fall down, you get up with a smile, right? You seek out ways to continuously improve. And the last characteristic I'll say, which is so important, don't sweat the small things. I see time and time again in my community people who are just starting out on this journey, taking one action step and having it not work out the way that they thought, and them having a complete and utter meltdown over something, that is in the grand scheme of things minuscule. And I get your frame of reference, because when you're just starting, everything feels like a big deal, and it is. But if you can take a step back and say, I'm in this for the long haul, and I'm going to decide to let almost everything just roll off my back, because everything that I'm doing in my life is just progress, right? There is no end point when you're on this journey. There is no, I've peaked, because the second that you think that that's the case, and this is what I believe, the universe is going to throw something at you and you're like, damn, okay, I guess not. Thank you, universe, for humbly, grounding me. There is no peaking. Everything is just progress. And so having the ability and the mindset to allow things to roll off your back is so critical to you making the decision to not feel overwhelmed as much as possible. Okay, so now that we've talked about what overwhelm is and how to get out of overwhelm and the characteristics of a leader, let's dive into the 3 keys to getting out of overwhelm. Key number 1, stop, find the source, mitigate. So as I've mentioned on this episode and probably in many episodes, I have anxiety. I've had anxiety since I can remember, which those of you who have anxiety already know is the complete opposite of feeling safe and secure. So what I've learned over the years from doing personal development work is that for me, at least, most of the time, my anxiety is caused by the unknowns or lack of information, right? On a recent episode of Grey's Anatomy, which is a show that I love, and I've been watching it since the beginning, the character Miranda Bailey, who's the chief of the hospital, she was talking to another doctor named Richard Weber, who's the former chief, about how she handles her anxiety around her husband being a firefighter. And she said, I work off of the information that I have. Ben, her husband, left for work this morning. He was safe. He helps lives. He's very good at it. Until I have more information, that is what I know. So for me, when I don't have the information, or I know that things are unknown or up in the air, I immediately go into like anxiety mode because I don't feel safe and secure because I don't have all the information, right? And that could be specific to work, finances, my children's safety, which is a big trigger of anxiety for me, as I'm sure it is for most parents. Just unknowns, right? Those types of things cause me to feel anxious, which makes complete sense when you think about it in terms of the entrepreneurial journey and building a business from scratch. So for years, I rarely felt like I knew what I was doing. And when you are mostly working outside of your comfort zone, you rarely feel safe and secure, right? Which would then make sense that you feel overwhelmed. So let's take it one step further and add in financial pressure. When you aren't sure where your next dollar is going to come from, you can't feel safe and secure, right? I spend a lot of time with other really successful entrepreneurs, and one of the most common fears that we all have is that the bottom is going to fall out from underneath us and everything is going to end. And it doesn't matter how successful these people are, we all had that same fear, except that feeling constantly anxious about that is no way to live. So for me, what I've been able to identify over the years of doing this work is I've got to find the source, I've got to stop, I've got to find the source, and I've got to mitigate the damage, right? So how do you find the source of feeling overwhelmed? Well, for me, changing my state is a really powerful tool for me to find the source. So when I start to unravel, whether it's because I'm don't have information about my kid's safety, right? Like my daughter's at the park by herself or whatever the case may be, or there's some financial stuff going on, or there's just tension and I don't have enough information to know concretely like what the next steps are and what's happening, I go and I change my state. So I'll either go for a walk, or I'll take a shower, or I'll lay down on the ground if it's not snowing. I'll do yoga. I'll dance walk. Dance walk for me is so fun. I'll get in the car often and I'll blast the music and I'll drive. I will physically remove myself from wherever it is that I am, and I have to change my state. The other thing that I do in order to stop, find the source, and mitigate is I talk to myself a lot. I ask myself, okay, what are these feelings about? Where are they coming from? I talk to myself all the time. And I even once texted my therapist to say, hey, I think I might be actually losing my mind because I literally can't stop having the same conversation with myself over and over and over again. And she replied and she said, ooh, that's so good. You're processing. Keep talking to yourself. Eventually you'll get the answer that you need and the conversation will end. And you know what? I processed it out. I did. It took a while, and sometimes those conversations last a couple days, and sometimes they last a couple months. But eventually, I can process it out. So for me, most of the time, the source of the overwhelm or anxious feelings is that something is unknown, and I feel like I don't have control over it, which then causes me to feel overwhelmed. So we can use the example of finances. When I start to feel anxious about money, it's usually because I don't have all the information. I don't know what was spent. I don't know what was made. I don't know where I stand. I don't know what's coming in. I don't know what's going out. I don't have all the information. And so I start to unravel and go to like the worst case scenarios. I feel anxious and overwhelmed. So even as I say it out loud, it's ridiculous because why is my first response to feel anxious, right? Like, why can't my first response be like, okay, this is amazing. This is a good problem to have. Now you're going to, go back and like look at your finances, right? Anyways, when I feel that way, I go on an information gathering mission. Once I have all the information I need, I can create a plan of action, whether that means actually scaling back a bit or hiring more people or whatever. I can't move forward until I have the information. And until I have all of the information, I won't feel safe and secure. But once I have that information, I instantly feel better, right? So it's been my experience that people don't really do the work to understand why it is that they feel the way that they feel. And so when we start to dip into overwhelm or anxiety or however that shows up for you, it's like all progress stops. And we are leaders, right? We can't stop making progress. What we can do instead is actually find the source of the overwhelm and mitigate the situation. So next up, key number 2, structure gives you freedom. Look, I'm going to be super blunt here. And if you feel like your life is like a gong show and your time management skills are non-existent, but you're trying to do all of the things, then yeah, it would make complete sense that you feel overwhelmed most of the time. One of the first leadership traits that I needed to develop was personal discipline, because it's way too easy to sit on the couch at 2 p.m. and watch TV, especially when you work from home and work for yourself because there's no boss to report to. Or it was way too easy to push off creating the next blog post until I felt a creative spurt coming on. Building structure into your life takes discipline and focus. But I know this to be true when I am organized, when my tasks are mapped out the night before, when my schedule is planned, I feel in control of my time and I don't feel anxious or overwhelmed. One of my most favorite quotes is by Robin Sharma. Show me your schedule and I'll show you where your priorities lie. And it's true. Do you have your most important tasks and activities on your schedule? Or are you waking up every day and then deciding what to focus on, because that will most certainly cause you to feel overwhelmed? And then the next question is, do you even know what to plan and schedule? Planning is like a muscle. The more you work on it, the better it becomes. So here's my advice. Schedule meetings with yourself. I used to do this when it was just me, myself, and I. I would go to Starbucks and sit down for an hour or two on a Monday and on a Friday, and I would plan out and recap my week. Now that I have a team, we have regularly scheduled meetings. So here's a basic structure that we use to plan out projects so that I know what to work on, and so does everyone else. We meet for 3 to 4 hours to create the initial project plan. So whatever the project is, let's say it's redesigning the website. We meet for as long as it takes in order to have a very detailed project plan for that specific project. Then we organize what needs to be done in order of importance. We group those tasks with 30-day deadlines. So what needs to get done within the next 30 days, and then everything else after that. Every task, and I mean every task, gets written down with a dated deadline. Some are hard dates and some are flexible dates. And then we assign the tasks to whoever is responsible for finishing them so everyone knows who is doing what. And all of that goes into our project management platform called Asana. Now, when it was just me, myself, and I was responsible for most of the tasks. And that's how it went. So maybe I had a graphic designer or maybe I had like a web person, but doing all of the things specific to that project did fall on my shoulders. But if I was doing a project like that, at least I had an outline for all the things that needed to get done, so I didn't feel as overwhelmed and burdened down by all of the things that needed to get done. And of course, if something changes on our project plan, no problem. We just change it. We just change the dates or we move things around. Our project plan is our working document. So you can do this with yourself, or if it's hard for you to think in terms of process, like what actually needs to get done, then find an accountability partner who can help you process out your project plan. As the CEO of your company, that's your responsibility, right? Resourcefulness is to find the resources that will help you make progress in your business. Here's the thing too, flying by the seat of your pants, it's for amateurs. And if your goal is to have a thriving business, then you must schedule in time to plan and then have the discipline to stick to your plan. Pivoting with your plan is okay and sometimes necessary, but dropping your plan halfway through because something better came along, shiny object, will cause you to never gain traction and leave you feeling overwhelmed. Building structure into your life might feel rigid, and I get that, especially if you're a creative and you need open blocks of time. I have open blocks of time in my calendar to create content, but the difference is that I know what content I need to create during those, let's say, 3 hours of open time because we've mapped out the project. So I'm not sitting down at my computer one random Monday thinking, what do I need to do today? I go into Asana and I look at all of my tasks with all of the deadlines. The other thing that has helped give me structure is my morning routine. It's the same every day. It usually starts at 5 a.m. with coffee. I typically write 1,500 words by 6:30 so that it's a 90-minute work block. During that time, I get the most important content done, which are usually writing emails or an outline for a Facebook Live or a podcast episode. For example, this entire episode was outlined and scripted over 2 5 a.m. morning blocks. So building structure and having the discipline to stick to the plan enables you to focus and get stuff done. And when you get stuff done, even small tasks, you are making progress, and that is a positive feeling. So show me your schedule, and I'll show you where your priorities lie. Okay, so we've come to the last key to getting out of overwhelm, which is expectations, or I should say setting realistic expectations. We're going to also call this one the pick 3. Oprah said, "You can have it all, just not at the same time." I'm not sure whoever made up the assumption that someone starting up a business could also handle all of the rest of the things in life. So I'm going to get a little feminist here for a second, because if we look at traditional family roles, when a man would venture out to start his own company, the wife would typically pick up the slack and just handle it. There'd be a conversation about all of the hours he'd have to put in, and the wife would just do all of the things to support her man. Given that my community is mostly made up of women, some who are married or have partners, I wanted to address this because it's extremely dangerous and unrealistic of you to assume that you can give your startup business 100% of yourself and still do all of the things. You need help to pick up the slack, which would require you to have a serious conversation with whoever is supporting you to ask for help. And here's some more tough love. It's actually irresponsible of you to assume that you can and should continue on in the manner with which you've been behaving, because you're going to burn out and then you aren't any good to anyone. Asking for support is one of those leadership characteristics that you have to embody, and you'll have to figure out how to be okay with sacrificing some of the things that you used to do. And if it feels more comfortable for you to replace the word sacrifice with letting it go, do that if that makes you feel better. So here's where the pick 3 comes in. A while back, I saw an Instagram post from the co-founder of the Whole30. Her name is Melissa Hartwig, that read, work, family, friends, sleep, exercise. Pick 3. I would amend this to also add in home-cooked food. So it would be like work, family, friends, sleep, exercise, home-cooked food, pick 3. The concept pick 3 came from a woman named Randy Zuckerberg, who, yes, is the sister of the famous Mark Zuckerberg. She authored the book called Pick 3, which you can go onto Amazon and find. The concept is so simple, and I resonated it with immediately because I am someone who believes that striving for balance is nonsense. I know enough now to know that it's really not possible to feel balanced or strive for balance when you're trying to do all of the things. And it's not like you can't ever feel, I guess, like you have it all together, because you can. It's just impossible to do that with the unrealistic expectation that you should be able to handle all of the things, because we're going for safe and secure. We want to feel safe and secure, right? Not frantic and stressed out and overwhelmed. And so since there's only 24 hours in a day, we all have to set priorities and goals, right? And that means something's got to give. You've got to sacrifice something so that you can excel and master at something else. Hence, the pick 3 concept. So when I read Melissa's post, I immediately relaxed. It was like, yes, so simple. Pick just 3 priorities. And I'll add here too, we all have different seasons of life and business development. So make sure that your pick 3 are in line with where you are right now. Work, family, friends, sleep, exercise, home-cooked food. There were many seasons of my life where my top 3, my pick 3 were work, and family. Everything else, and I mean everything else, took a back seat. The season that I'm in right now is family, work, sleep. I'm prioritizing sleep over everything else. I fit in the others when time permits, but I don't beat myself up over it. And if that means that I only get to the gym once a week, so be it. There's going to be another season of my life where that becomes more of a priority and doesn't take a back seat to my other goals and objectives. The point is not to beat yourself up for not getting everything done every single day. I'd really love to know what your pick 3 are, so make sure you visit the show notes page, which can be found at thatwbh.com/38, and leave a comment to tell me what your pick 3 are based on the season of life that you're in. So there you have it. The 3 keys to getting out of overwhelm. Key number 1, stop, find the source, mitigate. Key number 2, structure gives you freedom. And key number 3, realistic expectations, and pick 3. This is the last time I'm going to say it. Feeling overwhelmed is a choice, and you can make a better feeling choice by implementing one or more of the 3 keys that I shared with you today. And as always, thank you for listening. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any new episodes coming up, please subscribe to the Business of Becoming podcast on iTunes. And I'd also be so grateful if you left a review as well. The reviews help iTunes know that people like the show, so that means that they'll push it up in the rankings. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.